Good morning. It is Friday, December 15th, 2023, and this is the Communications Subcommittee meeting. I'd like to call it to order, and first with the election of a committee chairperson. Do I have a nomination? Dennis.
I would like to nominate Julie Best.
Do I have a second? Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Julie, thank you for taking on this work.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you again for electing me to continue chairing this committee. As a first meeting of a newly seated committee, I think we have a bit of an almost organizational and review meeting ahead of us this morning, but Alan, I'll turn it right over to you to get us started.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Is this working? It is working, yeah. So the update on the communications committee, we just want to take this the opportunity just for a new committee just to bring us up to speed again. It can be, well, it will be brief per se. The information that we put forward, it really is a combination of the work we've done thus far. We did have the draft communication plan that was based on samples we received from different districts. We're still populating that. The focus groups, the information we get from those will also provide back into that communications plan if there are other communications that we feel would be helpful for the district, either from the schools, from the district at large, or from the board. So that's still sort of incomplete, so to speak, pending the feedback actually from the focus groups. We did include the survey results directly from the community and from, I think the staff was in there also, yes. And so if any of the members of the committee wanted to see the takeaways and the actual specifics, we thought we would give you the raw data. So that process has been completed. From that feedback, we generated questions that will frame the discussions with Patrice McCarthy for the focus group, and we'll go into the next agenda item. But that's in essence kind of where the working group is at the moment. We are looking at the policies also, policies pertaining to communication that we either have, don't have, or want to have. We looked at some of the policies from respective districts. And so on the table is the question as to whether we want to have specific ones or we want to amend, revise kind of what we have and where communications come up in our board policies to date. And that is a quick walkthrough of, I don't really intend to go through all the documentation unless there are specific questions for it. We just thought it would be helpful today just to come together. This group actually is a sort of working group per se, and our intent will be even for policies to dedicate a meeting just to look at the policies and provide feedback and hear feedback from the members of the committee. So we thought it would just be a nice wee opportunity just to come together, calibrate this is the first meeting of the new committee. Anybody, any questions, we provide that. I won't go on to the focus group because it's a separate, unless you want me to, but.
No, that's fine. May I add a little?
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Alan. So just to add a little more color to what Alan just walked through, the spreadsheet of the draft communications plan, as we call it, just so folks know where that came from. That was populated by members of the committee, staff and central office helped populate that as well so that we could just get a read on what kind of communications are out there. So who's communicating what to whom on what subjects, and it was designed so that we can sort it, so that we can look at it by topic or look at it by sender or look at it by audience as we move forward and want to work on optimizing this and fleshing it out. But it's a starting place, as Dr. Adley said, for now, and as we work through and get some more learning from all of our stakeholders, we will come back to this to build on it and hopefully improve upon it. Focus group findings, excuse me, thank you. Survey findings, Alan covered, and in the email that I sent you, there's the link to the kind of summary of what the findings were from here, if you're looking for that. But new thoughts, of course, are always welcome. So it's great to have new eyes and to get your eyes on this material and your thoughts included before our focus groups in January, I think is what's super key. And then on policy, I'll just add, obviously, we're not the policy committee and there is a policy committee. And what we will be looking at as we review example policies from other districts and also our internal policies that touch on communications to some degree is just to kind of get some high level thoughts and findings that we want to bring back to the full board and talk to the board about, in the hopes that that will help inform the charge that's given to the policy committee when it's time to start looking at crafting, revising, developing policies for us.
So you even had the contents of another meeting in here just to, which was really the update on the questions, where we stand on focus groups, where we stand on town hall meetings, and we can sort of talk about that too when I talk about the focus groups.
There's a lot of work that goes on here in this committee. The June 3rd, I think it was June 3rd, is the one that's included in here. That was a big meeting. So that's one to spend some time on. And again, as Alan said, the materials are included here. Anybody have any initial thoughts or questions? Yeah, Robin.
So I was just looking at, so the survey feedback from the parent survey, the staff survey, and specifically looking at a lot of the written comments and feedback. And the kind of high level comments that I would say, first of all, with the parent survey, I noticed that the survey itself did not include a question about parents' satisfaction with communication with teachers. It only asked about parents' satisfaction with communication with the Board of Ed or the administration. And a lot of the written comments in the free text from parents were getting to the issue of some of the lack of ability to communicate with staff and have a dialogue, whether that is, you know, if there are issues prior to report cards being sent out, having some kind of an opportunity to get feedback, or maybe the report cards themselves. And I'm not talking about elementary because they do have that at the elementary level. Maybe this is more middle school level, to have some kind of comments or at least a feedback loop. To take corrective action if needed prior to grades getting reported. So I know that was a specific comment in multiple places in the text. And also there was a comment about a lack of teacher communication to parents. This was at the middle school specifically, just, you know, whether that's curriculum related or anything, I think just there was some feedback about that I'm thinking potentially for the focus groups, it would be helpful to add a question about what parents, you know, might recommend or think about ways that we could improve the feedback or dialogue between parents and teachers, just to kind of get some thoughts from people about that. And then same thing for staff, because staff might have a very different view of that. And so I think that would be important to have as part of the focus group discussion. There's another comment that I also had was the staff feedback. In many cases, and again, we didn't have a question on the survey about staff's ability to communicate with the Board of Ed. I don't believe, or maybe there was, but there was a lot of text in the staff feedback that they didn't feel that they had an opportunity necessarily to have more of a dialogue with Board of Ed. And I don't know if that's our purview or if we really are restricted just having a dialogue with administration, but in terms of communications, it seemed based on the amount of feedback from staff that they did want to have some kind of an opportunity to voice concerns or voice input or be used as problem solvers. And even if that's informal, kind of not like a town hall that we have with parents, but maybe kind of some meetings, that it seemed like there were multiple instances of staff writing that they wanted to have some kind of ability to help talk through various things with the Board of Ed. So for the focus groups, again, on that front, I think maybe it would be helpful to potentially add a question about what staff might suggest to help improve their ability to kind of have a dialogue with the Board of Ed. Because they obviously can't attend all of the Board of Ed meetings. And, you know, I think we need to be respectful of their time and kind of give them an opportunity to have input as well. So those are just some of my high level thoughts initially on the survey.
That's great, thank you. Marge, do we think we could add a little probe on parent to teacher, teacher to parent for the focus groups? And with staff, make sure that we're getting at if they feel like they have or want more opportunities to communicate with the board, that'd be great. Yeah, Greg.
And just following up on that, much to Robin's point, like with the teachers, should there be any communication forum between the board and the teachers? I think that's a separate question. I don't know, like, it wasn't really part of what's up there now in terms of the purpose of this committee, but like, should it be part of the committee? Like, should the board have a direct feedback loop with the teachers to get feedback on, I don't know, whatever the important topic is?
Certainly, periodically, we have to, there should be vehicles to be here to provide feedback to board on issues or on what's happening in the school system, or there should be some sort of vehicle, at least to be able to come back and say, here's what we asked the staff, here's what their feedback is. The idea of just direct contact is a different discussion a wee bit, but tacitly we should be able to find a way for the board to know what the staff feel. That we're not going to preclude that. There's process and procedure to allow that to happen, and we should have those process and procedures to allow that to happen. You need to be on top of kind of what's going on, and not just necessarily hear from me or from our administration. But at the same time, we have to be careful how we do that. That's all.
And maybe it's also a function of making sure that staff is aware of the ways to communicate with us. We, a few months ago, had a teacher from the middle school who came and spoke to us in public comment about a great initiative about getting kids signed up for library cards. But it was, he was not familiar with the process prior to coming and speaking to us, but it was great. And it was wonderful to have him come here and talk to us about this great initiative. So there may even be an opportunity just to make sure that faculty is more up to speed on how they can talk to us effectively.
So there was a question, like number 10 was members of the community would like to engage more directly with administration and the Board of Education. And one of the follow-up was, how might this be accomplished? If the staff want to do the same and they're so interested, whether they are or whether they aren't interested, that'll come out in the process.
There are boards that do periodically hear directly from the union, which is a bit different from the contract, but who actually schedule periodic updates from the union. So there are different ways that we could look at possibly, to Alan's point, implicitly. So I think when you take that topic up, there are different methods.
But one other comment, if I have a question about, there's significant feedback both from parents and staff regarding curriculum and changes to existing curriculum potentially, so we obviously get direct communications about new courses, removal of courses. We have a lot of discussion and we vote on those. But the feedback in a lot of the text from the parents was that maybe, a desire for more updates or curriculum updates. And this would be at all levels. And I don't know how frequent that would be or how it would need to be, but to have access to that and be given updates on what might be covered. And especially if curriculum is being changed in some way. Likewise, there was also staff feedback that in some cases there was dissatisfaction, it seemed to me, in some ways, that they didn't necessarily feel that their feedback was being listened to in some cases on curriculum or recommendations that they were making. And I don't know if that's across the board or if that might just be a couple people who made comments, but I would want to, hopefully, maybe in the focus groups, just ask the staff, how is that feedback loop working? Are there ways that we could improve that so that they feel that their voices are being heard? Because obviously the teachers are the number one kind of closest to the students who are going to see what's working and what is not. And so I just want to make sure that that's actually functioning appropriately as well.
That's great. And I'll just add to that, we have had discussion at this committee about the challenges of making the right information available to the right people at the right time. We have curriculum committee meetings monthly for the most part, and there's a schedule to those, and they cover different departments in pretty good detail. And there are occasionally, parent workshops and things like that to get people more up to speed on things that are happening in the district. And some people aren't available, some people aren't necessarily aware of them. So that's, I think, one of our charges is to help find the best ways to make sure that people know what's going on, because a lot of the information's there. I think EduPlanet is also helpful for that. It's a place that will be able to direct parents in the future to get
Yes.
more into what the curriculum looks like if they're interested. EduPlanet's kind of a, want to give it a 2-sentence description for me?
It's just a portal to it's a portal to house curriculum development, and also so that board members, personnel, teachers, parents can also view what we have. So it was a system to coordinate, bring coherence to, or greater coherence to, and record keeping of the actual curriculum. So it's a live document behind it that is behind the portal, but there are different opportunities for viewing, like a parental view of the units or otherwise. So it's a structure to the actual curriculum that is followed and recorded.
Is that live in
Yes.
public now?
But it's online right now. I need to go back and see what stage
It's not 100% populated yet, correct? There's
Well,
still.
it's definitely not
working on
100%
this.
populated, definitely not.
It's in progress.
But has it been communicated to parents yet, or is it not at a state yet where we're ready to communicate that? I was just curious.
Yeah,
I think there's been a general level of understanding of EduPlanet because it's been discussed in different forums, and I know even in some of the focus groups it's been discussed. But I just need to check with Amy and Julie just to be very explicit about the level of communication about it. I think the people who are following it, parents who generally follow board meetings and stuff, have a sense of it. I don't know the greater sense.
I
Right, I
don't think
mean-
we've done a big introduction of it to the general public, so to speak.
I
So
don't
that's-
get the sense we have, because the summertime curriculum meeting, they were talking about how they were populating it.
Yes,
But I don't believe that the general parent population as a whole is aware of it or knows that they can go to that to kind of view things. So I mean, actually, that could be a help. If it's ready, I think that should be something that is communicated.
maybe we should put on an agenda for the future when we will be ready to, when there's critical mass, so to speak, on that platform to want to push that out to the community.
Well, it might, I mean, you could also we could either have an update or otherwise on EduPlanet at the curriculum
Yeah.
committee meeting.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea as an agenda
Yep.
item. Yeah.
Awesome. Dennis, you got anything? Are you good? You're pretty.
No, I'm pretty.
Pretty caught up.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else, or should we talk a little more about focus groups?
So the focus groups, which are the follow-up to the survey results, that will be the basis of those. They are scheduled now for January. We did reschedule them because the short notice of just wasn't helpful to people, and we didn't get the population. So we reschedule them. That's nobody else's concern about that. That's from my office, and just rollout of it. But we're not going to do it if we don't have the population. So we have rescheduled these. That is for January 17th and January 18th. Today there will be, as part of I just took over from my office the communication of this, just to take it out of other people's hands and to be very clear about it. There will be updates from each of the schools, from the PTOs, just pointing them to my communication later on in the day. So we're looking for 15 to 20 parents from each level of elementary school, high school, middle school. January 17th is a day for high school parents, elementary parents, middle school parents, and parents of any age group. There's another opportunity on the 18th following it, just in case some people can't come. I think not the concern we had. We're wondering what would we be able to get enough parents, right? If we end up getting too many, if it flows over to, like, it was originally 15 we're looking at, if it flows over to 20, we'll take a 20. If it flows over to 21, we'll take 21. If it's 30 for a session, I can't take the 30, right? I would just randomly select those. If anybody isn't randomly selected and they call me about it, I'll put them on, right? Or if people really want to be on it, we'll find a way for someone to be on it. The main thing was just actually hitting the actual number. I think I'll have more of an issue with that potentially than actually people not being able to be included. So we'll be very inclusive about the process as much as we can. This gives parents here a wee bit of an opportunity, a couple of weeks to be able to respond and so on. There's a closeout date on it. I think was what was the closeout date? The 5th,
January.
5th of January. That should give people a good opportunity to be responsive to it. So that is going out today. It will be a Google Doc. Where people just simply sign up for the school or the session.
Okay, so just to amplify that, for anyone who can hear my voice, Dr. Adley's communication today will include a Google Doc for anyone who's interested in signing up for the communications focus groups the week of January 15th. Please do so. We would love to hear from you.
I would say if anybody says it's exam week, that's true. It is exam week, right? But our staff wanted it for exam week. Right, so we have the same, this is only for parents today. We have something similar for our staff. We just go through our union representation to get our staff members, but they requested it particularly for the high school. If they're here, they can come over, they can correct their papers at in the evening or otherwise. That was more convenient for them to actually come over during the exam week. And I'll also point out it's in January, so whether I don't have any rain check days, weather delays.
It doesn't snow
days,
anymore.
So hopefully that'll cooperate with us. But with that, we're ready to go.
One question, is the staff, are we doing a separate focus group
Yes.
with the staff?
Correct,
And what
yes.
is the timing of that?
That's also those 2 days.
Oh, okay.
I didn't put that as part of the
Okay.
parent communication. That will also take place over those 2 days.
Can we get the schedule? I understand you won't send that out in the parent communication, but can we just get the schedule on that just so we know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Question for the committee and Alan. Alan, you mentioned you're going to blast it out and the PTO will amplify it, which is wonderful. But it's our staff that have access to all of the email addresses. So do you have a plan for the principals to amplify it also or to communicate it out?
Well, the principals will today. I mean, it's just part of their weekly communication.
So they will as well.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
going to communicate, the principals will communicate, and then the PTOs will follow with an amplification.
It's kind of one and the same because what they send out, the principal has a message in there, and perhaps a PTO will have a message in there.
But those are subscription based.
Right.
Whereas some of our principals do have their own communication. It's sort of a philosophical question for the committee as well, because some of our principals have their own communication mechanisms, some don't, but those are not subscription based.
Mhm.
So I think when we communicate something like this, we might want principals to directly
I
use
can do
the
that. That's
the
easy.
emails.
Yeah, and Jill, also because the wires go out on specific days with something time sensitive like this, I think it would be important for everybody to receive it at the same time
Well, listen, they'll receive it
from you.
from me at the
Right.
same time. They're all being pointed back to me. So once mine goes out this afternoon, all the parents will have it. Because they're not going to have all the details in the parents or the PTOs, right? The form's not there. It just gives you a general look out for the opportunity with Dr. Hadley's communication. Because they won't be able to sign up from the parents or from the PTOs.
It's all in the Google form, right? And the principals are aware of this and the PTOs are aware of this and the need to communicate it as broadly and to communicate it as many times as we can
Right.
between now and January 5th. And the January 5th cutoff is just so that we can make sure that we have enough people, because if we need to make sure we get more middle school parents or more DHS parents, there's some time to do a little more outreach and recruitment.
And as part of the communication, everybody will receive a communication back, whether you're being selected or whether you haven't been selected or.
Is the expectation that all members of this committee would attend all of the focus groups as well? So what's the expectation there?
It's an excellent question. We've talked about that a little bit. I don't know that that we're expecting all of us to be there, because I think we want people to feel comfortable speaking freely. And so I guess I need your input from you all.
Well, Patrice has worked with the board on a number of levels of feedback, both from self-evaluations to other opportunities to work with her. So my recommendation would be let Patrice do it. But if somebody wants to pop in, I just would respect the chair's comment on that. Does it restrict it or does it not? You know, if you want to pop in and see how it's going, I wouldn't preclude that, but there is some logic to keeping it, letting people be objective enough to speak their minds, and that would include about myself or anybody else. I'm not going to be there, right? Marge is not going to be there. Marge will do, will facilitate the day with if Patrice needs anything from lunch to logistics.
And then do we get a write-up or something
Yes.
from Patrice with
Yes.
all of the feedback? Oh, okay.
To this
Okay, great.
to this board,
To
yes.
this committee, okay.
Which I think is part of the magic to, you know, there's some magic to focus groups in that you need to interpret what's being said, right? This is qualitative feedback, not quantitative feedback. So that report will be kind of the critical findings, and
And I think-
Patrice has some expertise here. So that's
And I think we said that we would wait to the next meeting to come back to this. Actually, to be honest with you, I think the next meeting is on the
Yes.
one of these. That's not. Getting
We're gonna have
it
to move that.
scheduled was more important than freeing up that day for this committee to meet so that the committee could meet. We'll schedule at another time.
correct. So the 17th will not happen as scheduled for this committee to meet, and we'll have to come up with a new date for that next meeting once we have the focus groups conducted. Did you have something? Sorry, sliding in my.
Thank you for asking. No, you're good.
Okay. All right, can we get on focus groups? We can move on to budget communication. Wanna jump in, you want me to tee it up?
Whatever you'd like to do.
We had talked about, as we are, I guess we're already in budget season, but kicking off budget season, the value of this group having some discussion about how we will be communicating out budget developments, materials, et cetera, to the community, and all of our stakeholders as we work through the process. So Alan was going to give us maybe a thought or two on things we might look to do to facilitate that this budget season.
Well, I can only share with you what I'm going to do. I'm happy to listen to this group if they want to do anything differently. But what we agreed to do, well, first of all, there was a couple of town meetings that we scheduled to do. One of them, depending on what the topics were, well, we ended up having a topic at Tokenique. Then another one would be the budget.
Oxford.
Sorry, thank you. And then another one would be determined in the spring. So I will today, part of my communication, start that discussion about the presentation of the budget, the Thursday presentation, the Saturday presentation. Encourage people to stay involved in the process, given the budget calendar. And from there, I'll continue to give updates. I was thinking of doing something for one PTO just in general. The week of, it'll either be the week of the 8th or the week of the 22nd, because the week of the 15th is all of these focus groups and so on. So I would have I would tend to have a meeting with for the PTOs if they would like to come and learn more about what the superintendent's budget is. And then we'll follow the process from there. If the board wants to do any more than that, I'm open to suggestions of what they might do that we haven't in the past, but I'll leave it at that.
The PTO meeting you're describing, Ellen, would that be something that's an open invite for, how's that different from a town hall?
Well, typically PTOs, not all, but some of them would invite the superintendent to come and talk about the budget, right? Rather informally, right? But instead of going to 4 or 5 of them, or 3 or 4 of them, or 2 or 3 of them, I would just have one and leave it open for the PTO. Certainly one elementary and maybe one secondary.
And then a town hall in addition, that would be a broader
Well,
invitation?
no, I'm using town hall loosely here.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm following. And in your communications, I'm guessing you mean your weekly email?
Yes,
Okay, and would you include kind of the schedule of here's what to expect, or moving forward, maybe live links to key documents?
typically-
or key meetings?
whatever has taken place, if something has taken place, we'll post a link to it. For now, today's communication will just be pointing out when you come back on that first week. Thursday will be a presentation of superintendent's budget. The materials are presented on the evening, then followed up by our department budgets on the Saturday. So that will be incrementally giving people information as it's about to occur, upcoming, or has occurred.
Great. Questions or thoughts from
Just
anyone?
one question, and just based on prior parent participation, when they had a superintendent kind of come to their school to talk about the budget. In my experience, at least when I was at the elementary school, it was a pretty crowded room when the superintendent came and did that. So if you're planning to do that for all of the elementary all at once, my only question would be, and I don't know if it would be so crowded that we wouldn't have space, but I don't know, what the opportunity would be, or if so many people would want to attend that it might make sense to do it at a building level because they might have more specific questions and concerns.
That's a fair comment. I'll probably have to play that out. To date, they haven't been that highly attended, and maybe I don't attract a crowd.
Maybe this was way prior to COVID that I'm talking about. so-
Well, that's.
Seemed like it's a little different.
But I wouldn't rule that out though, on any given year, depending on what the issues are in any
Right.
given year. So.
Okay.
So I'll have to sort of like tease that out a little bit of it. But for now, that's what we're planning.
Okay.
Take that as it comes. Anyone else?
And for me, the dilemma of this is just how do we, because we conduct our business in public and we have a process to go through the budget, and it's to communicate the budget is not communicated until the budget is finalized. And so for me, I think what we could do maybe a better job of is describing how our budget process works and key moments where you need to, I don't know, pay attention is the wrong word, but tune in. Like for me, it's the last, I don't know, I want to say the last three, but it's our proposed ad cut night, then it's the public hearing, and then it's our final ad cut decision. And those are to me, the three big meetings that you need to pay attention to, because the rest is work in progress. And what is proposed and what we're discussing up until ad cut is information gathering and that of that like versus are we cutting a program or not? And until it's voted on that night, I think it's a little preliminary to communicate about where we are in our discussions. And I think it may cause people to get upset over something that they don't need to be upset about.
Yes, that can happen.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good point, because to some extent, if you do this in January and it hasn't been fully discussed or approved by the Board of Ed, those parents might view that as the equivalent of what we typically would do at the public hearing, where people are giving public comment in advocacy of some, a certain budget issue. And so you would, by doing this, the only concern I would have is that then the Board of Ed members would not really hear all of the questions and the feedback from the public, which usually during this formal process is a very critical part of the deliberations, because that's all a public record and kind of public meetings for the votes that ultimately happen.
So the superintendent's meetings with the parents is just another way for them to understand. Some people actually don't come to board meetings, right? And some of them actually prefer to go to the PTO meeting or otherwise, not necessarily for a budget discussion, but just in general. So it's not going to be talking about a board discussion about this. It would just be sharing what is being considered by the board at this point,
Okay.
what has been presented from the superintendent to the. This is the dilemma, like we either want the communication or we don't. Or we either want to increase the communication. So it's, for me, it won't be, you got to go to board as you got it right. I mean, clearly I'm putting forward things to the board for consideration that I think we should, but it's just as long as it gives the parents just an opportunity. What is this? Right? Can I ask a couple of questions about it? Yes, my board members can come to that. Of course I can. There's no problem with that. But it's only it's literally, it's just an explanation, clarification of things that are being asked in the superintendent's budget. It's not in any way interfering with the board processes.
And it's your recommended budget, certainly.
Yes,
Like you-
at that
you
point, that's
need
all
an
it is, yeah.
opportunity to share what you are recommending for the district. So, Alan, is there an opportunity to utilize the media as we get to some of the bigger dates? Or this might be a crazy question, but does your weekly email go to the local
Yes,
newspaper? It does. So they get that information from
because
you.
anything that goes to, they've already
To
asked that many
everybody.
times before, so the easiest thing is just to send it to people.
Okay, so, hopefully they will pick up and amplify when the public hearing is coming up and those key dates. And follow along with what's coming from your office. Okay. Yeah, Greg.
I have somewhat similar questions / observation that Dennis had. So like with respect to the budget, like a lot of times when we're thinking about like forecasting some of that out, like there's details around like key contracts that are coming up. And we show like, here's what we're budgeting. And my question is like, does that potentially hurt our negotiations as we're doing that? Because we're effectively telling those vendors, we've allocated this much money. Now they go and they see it and they're like, well, we know we've got it allocated. We're going to ask for the most possible.
I think the answer to that, Greg, is that we certainly have, if anybody wants to say what the line item is, there's a line item there in totality, but we don't break it down as by what percent for what unions.
Yeah, there was like an example, I think I'm on the finance subcommittee as well. Like, so I think there was an example of like a trash budget or something, a trash service or something like that, where it was like expected increase of 10%. So we should build that into the budget. I just like, maybe some of that should be held back in like an executive session or something like that until we actually have those negotiations. I don't know what the right way to address it is, or even if you can, but it was just an observation that I had where I was kind of like, aren't we kind of giving away the answer here?
Before bidding.
You are correct in that, but we tend not to discuss it at the board table. There's line items in there, but they're not delineated by any particular bargaining group. And should negotiations dictate that negotiations are negotiations, whatever happens, whether it's lower or higher than any particular amount, but they're not delineated, and we tend not to have those discussions for that exact reason.
We can take this offline, Greg. There are different kinds of contracts and they're represented different ways in the budget. When they are sensitive and upcoming for negotiation and we have no baseline, trash is a little bit different than than a staff, because trash is basing on area models. Staff is different, but let's talk offline.
All right, terrific. Anything else on budget communication?
I have a question for the committee, actually. Excuse me, Dennis, I take your point of the budget process. I think I see a few opportunities, like maybe Alan, during your PTO presentations, I can attend and explain the budget process from the Board of Ed perspective as one mechanism for informing that group of parents who choose to show up. I agree, board members would be great for board members who can just show up. And maybe you could include just a highlight in your email. I think another place where I'm seeing a possible tactic is maybe we issue a press release versus hoping that the press will pick it up. We've had some, the Patch might be willing to pick up a press release or something. The newspaper sometimes follows what interests us and sometimes it follows what interests the newspaper. The macro level of my question, is as we think about the budget process for our newer board members, are there areas where you want the board to communicate differently than it has done? For all of our board members, are there areas where you want to see something coming from us at a certain point in time so that the public is better informed about what's happening? We have Alan getting out and talking about the superintendent, but what about when we're done? And Alan talking about the superintendent budget to parents, but when we're done, do we want to communicate more? I think there's an opportunity there and we don't have to answer it now, the budget process, we have some time before we get to the end of ours, but it's something I think I'd like the community to contemplate.
If
The
the
committee.
board would communicate
Mhm.
something. Okay,
So-
and the press release that you're describing would come from Alan's office?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah.
keeping authors straight.
I've seen boards that do anything from publishings, a glossy, I don't know that we're at the glossy stage, but to just issuing, a co-written letter from the superintendent and the board chair, kind of describing the highlights of the budget, what the major drivers are, just for the public so that we can inform them at the end of our process. So some thoughts.
I like that. It's a nice thought. I love the co-author idea because we obviously do this work in collaboration, which is a nice underscore of that, but I think that's a great one to noodle on and discuss further. Anybody have any
But
immediate thoughts?
I'm just, when is the timing of these communications? Is this after the superintendent's proposed budget, you send out a press release, or is that too early?
Well, I think it depends on what you're trying to communicate. I think the press release, you were talking about some of the budget timeline information. And so that would be when people know the timeline. What I was describing on the back end is sort of a summary of this is the budget that the Board of Ed is putting out, and this is why we're putting out this budget.
I mean, the approved Board of Ed
The
budget.
approved Board of Ed budget.
After
Thank you,
we've
Robin.
worked on our
After
work.
we've done our work.
This is the tricky part of trying to straddle this line, because at that point, when you put out this is what the Board of Ed has proposed, it's too late to comment because it's done. Right? So you need to get it that week before we do add cuts and say, these are what we're proposing, and to me, it needs to go out at that timing. Because if we do it in mid-February after we voted on the budget, there's no way for any parent to say, the only thing you can do is go to the RTM or the Board of Finance and cut, right? You can't add.
Right.
And so I think that could cause frustration to parents of saying, I didn't have a voice in the process. Just my 2 cents with that. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think we have to, there's a fine line in
No, you
how
have a
we
point.
communicate here.
You have a very good point. I wonder if what about the idea of putting out a press release after Super Saturday, which is the only least fitting name, the only more unfitting name than our retreat during the summer. But anyway, I digress. Putting out a press release following Super Saturday with information on what's coming next. There was a 72-hour meeting this past weekend, and the board worked through the questions, et cetera, coming up next. And the press release would be released to our community as well as to the press, and hopefully picked up by the press, to really make some noise and get some attention about where we are and what's going on in the coming weeks. And then I do agree with you that a wrap-up piece is a valuable tool before it moves on to the Board of Finance and eventually the RTM. So maybe we could take care of both with 2 vehicles.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say in that, so the press release that would come after Super Saturday, for
Yeah.
example, I think it would be really important to stress in that press release, here are the opportunities that parents can give feedback, the public comment before all of these different meetings, or definitely the public hearing. And then after the final vote of the Board of Ed, when you do a wrap up, also note in that press release that parents have an additional opportunity to give feedback at the Board of Finance public hearing and that date, because that still has to go through that process. And, parents still have feedback or just, I think those are key things that some parents, especially people new to town, would not be as familiar with.
I agree in terms of just providing an advanced, very simple summary of here's the process to parents. And I think that addresses the issue, because they can't say, well, we didn't know about that because you said, here's what's going to happen. And then at the end, I think, Jill, to your point, having a very simple, high level summary, here's where we ended up, would be really helpful, because some people can't look at all the detail and don't have time to read through it.
Right. Okay.
I might just add a wee bit more detail to what I'm doing today, just to lean into it a wee bit, and then maybe as we go along, we continue, even at the board level, when we're discussing some of these processes, or in the processes, what needs to go out in advance of the next meeting or the next 2 meetings, or because I'm hearing what we're saying, but I'm also still hearing from my perspective, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. I'm going to continue to flag and stuff, I'm not quite sure what I'm hearing, what the board wants, is going to do or not going to do, but you can, I think we're just, I don't know if we're just going to hold ourselves like accountable together just to navigate through this, or
I think so, and I
Yeah.
think we're thinking that maybe an extra communication following Super Saturday. So in addition to what you'll be
Yeah.
communicating on a regular basis. And then we
okay.
can work.
So we'll flag
through-
one for after that date,
Yeah.
and we'll try and put something together.
And we'll work on that.
Okay.
We can work on that together.
Yeah, I just think parents will appreciate being notified of these things because the whole point of this committee is to help improve communication and make sure that they're informed and that they understand how they can interact and when they can give public comment or feedback.
But with that, so I'm just curious, why do you choose the Super Saturday? To me, the information, the key information date is this, our ad cut night. And to me, that's where that information needs to come out, because the following week is a public hearing, and that's where you can comment on what we're looking to add or cut. And to me, that's the key, at least as a board member, that's the key meeting for me to listen to the public. Because the rest is our process. Again, I'm not trying to, please don't take this as I'm trying to not have communication with the public. It's just, we're going through a process, and the process is how it is today, is that public hearing is to me the key meeting of the whole budget process.
Okay.
And that's where we hear how valuable a program is to parents or not, and whether or not they're okay with letting something go or not. And you know, if we propose a cut and no one comments on it, that means that most parents are happy to let that go. And when you propose a cut and 40 parents get up and say you can't cut this program, it gives you pause to say maybe this is something we should put back in. At least for me, but that's how I view that. But to me, that's a key night, and that public hearing is the key vehicle of the whole process for me.
That's a fair point. We can think about what the exact right timing is. There's part of me that wants to get people paying attention far enough in advance. so
And I'm
they
not
can-
saying we can't do both.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the
Yeah.
better way, but
Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay, let's think on that if that's okay. We don't have to decide that for sure today. Okay, good points. Thank you. Right,
Excuse me, John Cini has a question. John, you are unmuted.
Guys, it's not public comment yet. I'll wait until then.
Thank you.
Oh, I wasn't
Thank
sure
you,
if he was
John.
going to participate.
Okay, great. Anyone have anything else on budget communications?
One more question for the committee. One of the other things that happens during the budget season is sometimes we're contemplating something, for example, and information gets out ahead of us, or sometimes misinformation, or things get described differently than we would describe them as a board. Do we want to consider any sort of mechanism for responding? Do we just want to continue to use our board meetings, or do we want to consider anything else? As a question for the committee.
It kind of goes to like the thing that I was talking about before, like is that caused because we put out some detail and people see it and then they start misconstruing it or start thinking for themselves? Like maybe we need to hold back some of the detail until we actually have the important conversations so that people aren't jumping to conclusions. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's hard. I mean, we're obligated to share the information to make it available to the public. So what they do with it is up to them. I mean, we've seen our survey, for example, we've seen things taken and run with in other directions than they were intended. And I don't know that we certainly can't always control for that. Can we try to correct it, I guess is the question. I'm not a big fan of being overly reactive as a style. So that's my initial response is you can't always control what people are going to say, but I'm wide open to other opinions. So please, if anyone has-
Just to that point, I think maybe I'm kind of reconsidering if you do something right after Super Saturday, maybe that is too preliminary because that cuts off all of the different discussions and follow-up meetings that the board is going to be having where we are actually discussing the detail and getting questions from the Board of Finance and the RTM as well, where the public then would have all of that additional detail and information. So I guess I'm kind of getting to where Dennis is talking about, where, you know, it's really right after the ad cut night that it's the most kind of finalized and where everybody's going to have all of the information. And to Jill, to your point, I kind of feel like we have to play it by ear a little bit, because if we get the sense that there's some misinformation happening, we should deal with that more in real time and kind of figure out if that is needed.
And get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
Anything we can anticipate, obviously, is always better. If there's a discussion being had at the table that is challenging or convoluted, I think we can try to put the responsibility on all of us or on you, to recap at the end of that conversation. So what we're saying is X, and we're saying it for these 1, 2, and 3 reasons, and we're gonna look at this moving forward and just do our very best to put out as much of the correct, clear information as we can.
Maybe that early communication out to everybody where you're telling them about the process could preempt some of this misinformation, because you tell them, here's when we're actually going to have our views. And if you see anything before that, then it doesn't represent our views.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but I think the social media vicious circle is.
It will happen.
And I'm kind of in your camp. I think if we're reactive and start chasing that, we start violating FOIA, and I think we just have to work through the process, and if we see misinformation, then we need to bring it to the table and discuss it in public and say, you know, we've seen this is out in public. Here's where we are on this topic or these topics, and go at it that way. But I think trying to react in real time is not our strength, if that's the right word. And I don't know how we would do that as a board. And I'm open to hearing different discussions of that as well, but
Yeah,
I think it's difficult for us to do that in real time.
we can think about that more. Okay. Tricky. All right, great. Anything else? Are we ready for public comment? Michelle?
Good morning. If anyone in person would like to participate, please come up to the podium. If anyone online, please use the raise hand icon. John Cini, you are unmuted and recognized.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to remind you that we made some adjustments to the budget calendar. So listening to all this discussion, I think, we already have a well-defined and telegraphed budget process in place. I just think, if you want to embellish that, make sure the new calendar is posted. I don't want to get in the minutia of the rest of the discussion, but I think we have a great practice. It's worked in the past. I think we find it, even to a better process. So if we can just highlight that and then go through that process, you're not going to run into any problems. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
No one in the room? No, someone in the room.
Joanna Walsh, 17 Pleasant Street. Just first with the PT, we call it the road show, when Dr. Adley goes to all the different schools to discuss his initiatives. It was only 2 years ago that it was standing room only or Zoom room only when open choice, and he was being discussed at every school. So I don't know what's in this year's budget, but it might be necessary to visit each school individually if there's something in there that draws a lot of attention. The only other thing is that last year, the public comment and the vote on modifications was the same night, the public hearing. And I think this year it's not. I think they're back to being 2 separate nights, but that's sort of when panic sets in, that people don't know what's going on and they feel like things are being cut and they haven't had an opportunity to really talk about it. So from our perspective, the more information everybody has, the sooner, the better it is. And yes, you're discussing and talking about things and nothing's settled yet, but the way to get people to panic is to tell them not to say anything or do anything or just wait, because people will wait and wait and wait. And then if something doesn't turn out the way they hope it will, they'll feel like an opportunity went by for them to have their say.
Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.